I'm Teisha Bader with Shalom TV's news update for Friday, July the 19th, 2013. We begin with a dramatic breakthrough in U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry's peace efforts. Kerry announced tonight that an agreement has been reached on the resumption of talks between the Israelis and the Palestinians.
This is a significant and welcome step forward.
Kerry said that the sides agreed to resume peace talks without preconditions after a more than 3-year standstill. He made the announcement during a press conference in Jordan's capital of Amman after a series of meetings with Palestinian officials there, and most recently a meeting with Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas earlier today in Ramallah. Kerry returned to Amman from Ramallah for the press conference, where he said, "We have reached an agreement that establishes a basis for resuming negotiations. This is a significant and welcome step forward," further saying, "We know that challenges lay ahead. Both sides understand that the difficult road ahead is worth traveling." Kerry said both sides have courageously recognized that in order to live side by side, they must begin by sitting together in direct talks. He added that he looks forward to seeing his friends from this region in Washington next week or shortly after. Kerry noted that the agreement's details are still being finalized. Initial talks are expected to be held between Israeli Chief Negotiator Justice Minister Tzipi Livni and Palestinian Chief Negotiator Saeb Erekat, with the talks at a later stage to move up to involve Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas. Meanwhile, Reuters had reported that U.S. President Barack Obama spoke over the phone yesterday to Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and urged him to resume peace talks. The White House said the president encouraged Prime Minister Netanyahu to continue to work with Secretary Kerry to resume negotiations with the Palestinians as soon as possible. And Israel's Finance Minister Yair Lapid wrote an op-ed in the New York Times today in reaction to the European Union's new guidelines, which ban funding to and cooperation with Israeli governmental and non-governmental entities over the Green Line. Lapid called the new guidelines a blunder, referring to them as the misguided mistakes of well-intentioned people. He wrote that the guidelines will delay the resumption of peace negotiations and encourage Palestinian extremists who object to talks with Israel. Lapid wrote, "It's challenging enough to remain sane and pursue peace in this crowded, problematic neighborhood of ours. We do not need our friends overseas to make it even more difficult," further saying the EU would do well to revoke its decision. As you may have seen on IBA News, despite objections from Israel, the EU published their new guidelines today. And here in the U.S., the heads of the bipartisan Congressional Israel Allies Caucus wrote a letter to EU Foreign Policy Chief Catherine Ashton expressing deep concern over their decision and urging them to reconsider. They wrote, "We strongly believe this move," referring to the guidelines, "is counterproductive to sincere American efforts to restart peace talks between the Israelis and Palestinians." The Anti-Defamation League has issued an informational advisory to law enforcement and to Jewish communal groups regarding a display of swastikas this weekend by a fringe religious sect known as Raelian. The Raelian movement is holding Swastika Rehabilitation Day tomorrow, Saturday, July the 20th, with events scheduled in cities across the U.S., including Boston, Los Angeles, and New York City, where the group plans to fly the swastika from a banner attached to an airplane. The ADL makes it clear in their advisory that the group poses no threat. ADL National Director Abe Foxman said, "While we wish the Raelians would understand why this Nazi symbol is so fraught with pain and so disturbing to many people, especially Jews, they have a right to free speech and expression, and there is no anti-Semitic intent so far as we know." The Raelian movement's logo consists of a Star of David intertwined with a swastika. The ADL explains that the Raelians use the swastika not in its Nazi context, but in its East Asian context as a symbol of good fortune, and that the movement doesn't have a history of violence and is not motivated by anti-Semitic or racist ideology. And finally today, the New York Post reports that Schindler's List is being auctioned off on eBay. Not a DVD of the Oscar-winning Steven Spielberg film, but one of the original actual lists of names of Jews that German businessman Oskar Schindler is credited with saving from the Nazis during World War II. According to the Post, the auctioning of the list went live last night and will continue for 10 days. It's being sold by California collectors Gary Zimet and Eric Gazin, who set the reserve price at $3 million but are hoping to sell it for $5 million. There are 7 original versions of the list, though only 4 are known to still exist, including 2 at Yad Vashem, the Israeli Holocaust Memorial Museum, and 1 at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. And that's Shalom TV's news update for Friday, July the 19th, 2013. I'm Teisha Bader. Shabbat Shalom.